Hello and welcome back after the coffee break for our panel, Why the Fashion Industry Needs a Sustainability Revolution. So most of us love fashion and we also care about sustainability. Now, who can help us being fashionable and sustainable at the same time? Startups. And yet we have three startups today with us, three startup founders joining us today. Two right here in Berlin, that is Namrata Sandhu, the founder of Vaayu, and Alina Bassi, the founder of Kleiderly. And from India, we have Sidhartha. Sidhartha, I hope you can hear us and see us.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and Sidharth, the founder of Twik.World. So I'll just go right into it and ask them how they are helping us being sustainable and yet being fashionable. So why don't you give us a quick pitch in two, 3 lines, what problem you're solving with your startup? So let's start with you, Namrita.
So thanks for having us, Diksha. We're really excited to be here to talk about our startups and what we're kind of doing specifically in the fashion industry. So I'm working on our startup, basically Vaayu, helps online retailers to track and cut their carbon emissions in real time. So what we essentially do is we help retailers to understand their carbon emissions and then kind of focus in on reductions and how do you mitigate and how do you reduce your carbon impact. So you have the lowest carbon products and lowest carbon supply chain you possibly can.
Great. Also, yeah, thank you so much for having us. At Kleiderly, we are recycling clothing into a plastic alternative because 87% of all the clothing that we wear ends up in a landfill or an incinerator. So we give the clothing a new life, and so essentially your old T-shirts could be turned into the next chair you sit on, your frame of glasses, your the microphone even. Yeah, we create a circular economy and give clothes a new life.
And over to you, Siddharth.
Hi, thank you for having me. Twik.World focuses on a digital platform that expresses everything about sustainability, and we aim to inspire a billion lives in the next 5 years to make them to live a sustainable lifestyle, and also helps entrepreneurs to create sustainable businesses. We believe that education is something that is very much required at this point of time, and the awareness is pretty much needed to create a larger sustainable development goals to achieve those goals by 2030. And it is a must, looking at the present scenario.
And how are you educating?
So it's basically a digital, it's an online platform where we bring influencers who are working towards different sustainable ideas, for example climate change, or so it's basically works on 17 sustainable development goals, and there are themes around that. So we bring influencers and people who are working on different projects, and talk about their projects and ideas and how it is impacting the larger section of the society and businesses. So we do it through the help of podcast, video interviews, and like kind of news content. So it's all about content at this point of time. We also do DIY projects, like do it yourself projects. So people can come and they can speak about their own innovations on the platform, and that's how we create an awareness among citizens and youth.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for also indeed helping us create content about sustainability today at this panel. On that note, so let's
Yeah.
talk about business models a bit. I think 90% of investments when it comes to VC money goes to tech startups. And as I've been a journalist myself, and for the longest time, it was a mandate by my editor to only write about tech startups in the media world. And all of you, interestingly, have different business models. So we'll start with you, Namrata. Your business models is reducing carbon emissions through a SaaS platform. And we've seen a plethora of startups in this particular stream, especially in Europe. I'm not very sure about other global markets. So straightforward question is that, do you think that it's the ultimate most effective way to reduce carbon emissions as a business model?
So I think when it comes to reducing carbon and kind of thinking about decarbonization, we need a lot of different things to happen at once, and we need all of different industries to do different things. I think from an online retailer perspective, we really focus on their carbon emissions that they generate from their scopes 1, 2, and 3. And for that, the SaaS model makes sense because we basically essentially look at the transaction volume of the business and we charge them based on what transaction volume they do. So it makes sense for kind of what we do and the model that we have with online retail specifically because it's transaction based. But I think for different businesses, different models will make sense. And I think we'll need to see decarbonization down the supply chain from an industrial perspective as well, and not just the retailers playing their part, but different aspects and different parts of the ecosystem doing different things.
So before I come to you, just a quick follow-up on that. So when you were raising capital, congratulations, by the way, on your seed funding, and you had so much competition. I mean, that's what looks to me from the outside world. What does really your differentiator becomes when you are a business model doing similar work as so many other startups?
So I think for us, the differentiator is the verticalization. So we're specifically looking at online retail and then later retail. So we're really focused in on one vertical. I think a lot of people are kind of industry agnostic, and that's quite a different business model from us because ours is really specific to the online retail industry, and kind of all of the reductions we can do is because we're verticalized and we focus on one area and one space. So that's kind of our focus and how we think about it, and I think is our main differentiator, and that's what was different for us.
Okay, good tip. Verticalization. And Alina, you are a chemical engineer turned entrepreneur, and now, particularly, I don't know, would you come under the tech category? But you can tell
I don't
me.
know.
But probably tell me what is your pitch to this tech-dominated startup world when you're going to VCs, or your journey of raising capital? How do you differentiate your business model?
I hope that I can essentially give investors a chance to think ahead. We all know we need to reduce carbon. We all know that we need to do it in various different ways. But it's not just about calculating the carbon. It's, okay, now we've calculated it. What do we do to implement to reduce it? And we provide that solution specifically for end-of-life clothing. But there's so much that needs to be done across the entire supply chain, just as Namrata said. So our pitch to them is first educating on the fact that textile waste is a problem, and then explaining what our solution is and why, what our USPs are.
So who are the people in the ecosystem that you work with? Like Namrata said, it's verticalization and retailers, and what's your focus?
For the textile waste, obviously, it's the fashion industry, focusing on collecting waste from them. It's also charity organizations who receive thousands of donations a week, and 80% of it can't be donated further. And on the other side, in the plastic side, it's any plastic user. So anyone who's looking to produce a plastic chair, for example. So there's two different streams. There's the fashion industry and then the corporates using plastics.
Okay. And what's more of your component of customers? Like, is it fashion industry? Sorry, too many questions.
Before it was the fashion industry.
Yeah.
But recently it's a lot more demand from the plastic consumer side.
Okay. Is that a good sign?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. And now we come to you, Sidharth. So you are, I think it's like a sort of Venn diagram between educational media content and sustainability. So what are your future plans about your business model? Will it evolve to something else? And what is your vision for the next 2 years? And do you also want to go through the route of raising capital and extending? Tell us something about it.
Yeah, so we have two pillars of the whole sustainability ecosystem. Like, one is content with the help of news, podcast, video interviews, so it moves around content. And second is businesses, helping entrepreneurs to create sustainable businesses, advising them, mentoring them to create stable and efficient businesses further. So on one hand we have an educational path, and another way is kind of so how we intend to move ahead in the next 3 to 5 years. Next 3 years, for example, it will be kind of a content led commerce in sustainability, kind of, so we have content, we're educating people, citizens, So kind of, it's already preparing a background, like kind of a background to make people aware about what is it at a bottom level, at a basic level, and then it's moving towards commerce. So lets people get aware about what is sustainability through different means of like channels, as I mentioned, that audio and video kind of things. And then what we are going to do is we will partner with different businesses, small, medium, in fact, large businesses, and startups who are entering into kind of a products and services space. For example, I'm talking about a sustainable fashion, for example. So those people who are into fashion and selling different sustainable products, so we will list them on our platform based on different parameters of SDGs and KPIs. Our like kind of, we have an advisory team who is going to, or I mean, so far we don't have a kind of a system which will automatically say that, okay, these are the parameters on which we can filter businesses on different SDGs and impact, and then we will list them. But going forward, we will have our own software, which, or maybe kind of a filtering system, so we can onboard companies. It's kind of a e-commerce platform, but it's kind of, say for example, Amazon for sustainability. So like that kind of model going forward in like kind of a longer run.
So eventually it will lead to a sustainability tech sort of a platform. And what is your, so will it be India-centric, or are you looking at more of a global platform? What is your vision in that area?
So we have 3 markets which we have kept in like kind of a focus in as of now. One is India, which is like is evolving, because a lot of people, they don't know what is it, right? What is sustainability? There's a lot of work needs to be done. So India, of course, is a primary, and then Europe, and then Africa. So it's kind of a triangular model which we have thought of, because Indian, Africa, and Europe is kind of sustainability catching up. So right now focus is only on India and some part of Africa and some part of Europe. But going forward, like we will capture these 3 markets slowly and steadily.
Yeah, indeed, we are all in this together in Berlin and in India. And talking about education, I mean, I do agree it's a very important aspect, and both of you can actually tell us that what is on ground happening when you actually have to educate your customers on this. And I personally believe it's a better situation in Europe as compared to what we have in other parts of the world. But probably we start with Namrata first, you, and then Alina, you. That when you are reaching out to retailers or corporates that you have to work with, like how educated do you feel they are, and how much do you bring on the table? And this entire cycle of closing a customer, how difficult is that?
So I think, as you said, the customer or the retailer is quite educated in Europe. I think they're quite aware of the problem. I think there's a lot of legislation that's come through and that continues to come through. So I think the awareness levels are high. I think specifically around fashion, there's a lot of legislation around the supply chains. That means that there are teams in place. So there's usually a sustainability team or a sustainability person, usually at all kind of businesses that we talk to. And I think that helps a lot with the conversation, because we specifically help ease the process of calculation of carbon, but really help them understand where the carbon is coming from. And I think for retailers, that's kind of a space that hasn't been automated. It's a space that's super time consuming. You need to pull all of the data yourself. So I think we've had less conversations around the business case and why they need to do it, and more transitioning, how do we do it, and how do we really deliver reductions that they can use, and what is the best way to do that for them, that they can understand that data that's really complicated and take that away and then be able to implement different kind of projects and things. And I think that's where solutions like Alina's really help, because we can then say that's where all of your kind of carbon, or a large share of your carbon, is coming. Then you need to find another solution and an alternate material, for example, and things like that. So we would look also at partnering on different solutions who are also reducing, and kind of try to build maybe in the future an ecosystem where people can then understand, okay, this is the impact, now what do I do about that? And then have solutions and things that you can then reduce. And maybe just to answer your question on the customer loop, I think it depends on the size of the customer. So enterprise tends to take longer because it's just the way enterprise works, and it's a kind of more complex process from a customer perspective. I think from medium and below, we see that you can convert customers really fast, and it will range massively depending on the customer and depending where they are in their journey. Usually if they've calculated carbon before and they've felt the pain, then it's much easier to convert the customer because they've understood the pain and they've been through it and they know how much easier this is. So I think it depends where the customer is on their journey as well.
And just one quick follow-up, is there any case study, any number that you can share in terms of that was super successful by this percentage they reduced cost, or I don't know whether they reduced cost at all, or they reduced something that had a profitability impact on their business?
I think with online retail, actually, you see a lot of synergies in the business KPIs and what they're trying to do as a business and where costs sit and where carbon sits. So something that's really obvious is the return rate. So if you're a fashion retailer, you're trying to drive down your return rate all of the time.
Okay.
Carbon is a metric that has never been put on return rate. So we have a brand that's piloting, and slowly we'll start to release that publicly, where they make the return rate carbon public facing. And that is something we're experimenting and testing. And on express rate, we've seen it reduces express rate when you make that visible to the customer, when they understand how much worse the carbon impact of something is if you express ship it versus you do ground or standard delivery.
Okay, very nice answer. And what about you? What is your educating journey when it comes to working with your customers in fashion industry and the other segment?
I think my experience with the fashion industry in particular has been that, I guess because clothing waste for them is a problem they face quite considerably. They know how much is unsold, they know what's defected and what goes to waste. There's less education around the problem because they face it. It's more educating them around the different solutions there are in place at the moment. So usually they tend to either pass it on to another store for it to be sold again, but if it's really defected and they cannot sell it, it's trying to explain to them what fiber to fiber recycling is, what we do, which is fiber to plastic recycling, what the different options are, and how it can actually be incorporated into their organization. What we find is that because we can take blends of different fabrics, that they're quite open to doing this because they want things to be as easy as possible. So if you said, we're a fiber to fiber recycling company that only takes viscose, it's very difficult for them to actually implement those changes. But the easier you make it for them to recycle, the more open they are to wanting to try. But I did see a change during COVID. So pre-COVID, they were very, very excited about the solution. COVID definitely made things harder because it obviously wasn't a priority as much anymore. But I feel like we're now coming out of that COVID cloud, maybe, in some aspects. And so businesses are coming back and showing the interest again.
Wow. So, actually, that was my next question. So you meant that after COVID, it became less of a priority?
Yeah, I guess it's because they had to know if they could even keep the lights on, right? At that point in time, would certain fashion brands survive the pandemic? So where it was maybe priority number one, it became 2 or 3.
And did you have a similar experience?
So no, I think the difference is probably that Alina looks at both online and offline, and a large share is offline retail and brick and mortar, where there were less customers, stores were closed, and I think physical was much more impacted. E-com, on the other hand, significantly performed well, and I think it's quite different in e-com specifically because obviously COVID accelerated growth dramatically, so I think we didn't see that on the e-com side.
And Sidharth, what's been your experience in India particularly? We know that the COVID situation had massive impact. So with businesses focusing on sustainability, was it also on the back seat for businesses?
Yeah, it's on the back feet. First of all, forget about sustainability, but I'll give you some kind of examples, like in the industry specific examples. Like say there are a lot of factories in Gujarat. There is a state in India where we will see a lot of manufacturing units in paints. They manufactured paints and some hazardous kind of ingredients they use and all. I mean, it's really painful when you go to those areas. You will see pollution around, and these companies are really kind of very specific to the paint industry and and allied industries related to those kind of who use hazardous ingredients while manufacturing that produces much of CO2 and all. So these people are really struggling in terms of businesses. They have been struggling for last 1 year, and now they have just like kind of come to a stable situation where they're earning something. I mean, they will catch up to the sustainability bandwagon. I mean, everybody is talking about sustainability, but it is difficult for them to actually implement it at this point of time and think about how do I reduce CO2. It's now for their survival. They want to sell something right now. They have to look at the survival rather sustainability, but it will catch up maybe probably in the next 2 to 3 years. Things will change, but now I think most businesses are caring for their survival and kind of a growth, like so
Yeah.
it will take some time.
I mean, being from India, I can actually relate to it. Also, like the normal consumer, you really do not think so much about sustainability unless you move to Europe and see, okay, like the lifestyle pretty much accommodates to your, the sustainability issues. So I have to ask both of you this. We had founders yesterday, and they all said they want to take their solution back home. And this is AsiaBerlin, and you're Berlin-based founders. And how do you think of, have you ever thought of taking your solution back home? And if yes, what's the timeline? Or is it too far right now? So, Namrata, yours.
Sure. We actually get quite a lot of interest from businesses in India, and we get quite a lot of inbound interest from them. So I think we're really focused on Europe right now because it's easier for us to deliver, but because we're software, it's quite easy to expand into global markets. So for us, we very much see India as a big market, and it's a big online retail market where people are buying a lot online. So for us, we definitely see it as a space that we need to get in. And I think maybe the customer awareness is not as much on the B2B2C side, but I think we'll see that changing. And I think with the younger generation in India as well, we're seeing that changing, where they're asking a lot more. They're really aware of climate change, and I think it's similar to what you're seeing across the world. So for us, it's very much on the horizon, and I'm obviously from India, so specifically would love to get into that market, but I think we'd look at that maybe latter half of next year, probably more in the future from like a 12 to 15 months perspective, but definitely on the radar and definite interest coming through. Similar in Latin America, actually, as well.
Okay.
We get a lot of inbound interest from Brazilian, Mexican companies. So I think you're seeing a lot of the developing economies are really interested, and the consumer actually does care quite a lot.
And how does your investor feel about that vision?
I mean, it's growth, right?
Yeah.
Growth is always good. So I think there's a
Okay.
perspective on that is a really big e-commerce market with some
Okay.
of the biggest players in the world from India. So I think being able to deliver and actually have an impact from a reductions perspective, but also I think because a lot of the manufacturing is there, the solutions can have faster impact, because then you can tie the manufacturing processes and the retailers, and everyone's quite closely knit, and a lot of the manufacturing is still very much in Asia. So I think from a reduction perspective, there's a lot to be done in that kind of region as well.
So we really look forward that you come here on the stage again and talk about your business in Asia, and AsiaBerlin is hooting for you to do that. And Alina, you grew up in London, but you are also, you have Indian roots, and you spoke about that. And how do you think about taking your business global and to Asia or London? You're already visible. To tell us about that.
For us, really, our focus is on Europe. Not being a SaaS solution, it's harder to scale, of course. I would see that there would be some movement towards India, again, because clothing is produced there, and that's where there are like 15% of clothing is wasted at the production floor. So it's definitely a route or an area where we can collect clothing waste. But we see the brands really in Europe actually being more excited about this now, and making sure it's located here first. So it definitely would happen at some point, but I don't think within the next 5 years.
Okay, that's an honest answer. And also, we have like 5 minutes, so I'm thinking if there is an audience question, I would love to take that up. Okay.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much, guys, for sharing this platform and the insights from the industry, especially in the context of sustainability. My question to you would be in terms of whenever you talk about sustainability and especially in fashion industry, retail industry is responsible for almost 10% of the carbon emissions, right? And of course, it's a massive problem, and also the retail industry knows about it. Even then, we hear about these massive brands, like, I don't want to name names, but then there are luxury brands who are actually destroying these products, okay? And that's a massive waste. We are talking about shortening the supply chain. We are talking about how to optimize this process of like Alina, what you're doing is amazing. Like avoiding all this textile going to incinerators, or for example to the landfills. But then if brands or if their retailers are still doing that practice just in order to create like an artificial demand, what can be done about it? And of course, what I understand at policy level things can be done, but then why these big brands are not doing this? Or are they completely ignorant about this problem? Or what's your take on that?
I think things are changing now but I think the pressure has to come from the consumers, because without them putting pressure on it, they can continue to behave the way they are because there's no repercussions. There obviously also needs to be laws in place that make it either really expensive or illegal to send clothing to an incinerator. And the more laws are in place and the more consumers put pressure on it, the more brands will actually make the effort to invest in sustainable solutions. In my experience with luxury brands has been that actually luxury has been way more open to solutions like this rather than fast fashion brands. The luxury industry really relies on their brand values and on their reputation. So they want to make sure that their reputation is as protected as possible. So from my specific insight, I've had luxury brands being much more interested than even the sustainable brands.
Okay. And actually, on that note, probably we have like just 3 minutes, but we as consumers, and people who are not really change makers like three of you in the system bringing a change, what can we do so that the fashion industry actually has a sustainable revolution? So if three of you could give tips to consumers here, what would that be? Like, now we start with Sidhartha.
It's very simple. Don't go for shopping. If you go for shopping, I mean, just look at your cupboard and just see what is needed. I mean, that's it.
So, but we also want to be fashionable. So what do we do, Alina?
I agree. I do think you need to think about whether you really need it. I think there's different ways you can do it. So you could consider something like a capsule wardrobe where you really optimize all of your items to make sure that they fit together, and then the optimum number is only 37 items. Another would be to really spend the time to think about what style is true to you, and then you're not wasting money on the new trends that are coming out because you know that that's not interesting for you, and you're just looking into long-term goods that you keep that have a good quality. And if you really have to shop, then I would suggest secondhand stores, and there's lots of secondhand stores out there now, so I think it should be very easy, specifically within Europe.
Okay, and what's your favorite secondhand store?
Probably because I'm a friend of one of the founders, Vino Kilo.
Okay, so next time you bring...
But that's a bit biased.
Okay. And what is your tip, Namrata?
I think it's similar to the other speakers. I think it's keeping things in circulation as long as we can, using the things that we have for as long as we can, and making sure when we're done that we're disposing them in ways that they're recycled. And even if that's a little bit more effort, and if it takes us going somewhere else, trying to put in the effort when you're done with something, giving it to a friend, just trying to keep things in circulation for the longest amount of time that we can and buying as little as we can. I think everyone says longevity and extending the life of things is what will move the needle the fastest. And I think maybe the second quick thing for me would be you choose the brands you buy from. So maybe just do some research and pick the brands, because you empower the businesses if you support them and they are making an effort to be more sustainable. So, yeah.
Okay, so shop less, buy secondhand. read about the brands. Probably when Sidharth has a list also on brands that which one to pick. And then you can bring actually a sustainability revolution to the fashion industry. And thank you so much, phenomenal speakers. I had so much fun talking to you, and thanks for joining us at AsiaBerlin Summit today. Thank you, Sidharth, and thank you,
Thank
Alina
you.
and Namrata.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.